have a subscription to the Atlantic, and they have these columnists. And there's a couple of the columns I just love. One's called Brooklyn Everywhere by Oxachiti Gonzalez, who's a Puerto Rican woman who grew up in Brooklyn. She went to Harvard or something like that. And she deals with, how have I gotten from there to here? It's not like she's insecure. She doesn't think she's dumb. But how do I mix the values I have from that old neighborhood? And that old neighborhood's a lot like my neighborhood. A lot of noise on the street where I live. Then there's Human Being by Jordan Calhoun. He's an African-American who has a similar story. I mean, I don't know. His parents might have been teachers or something, but he didn't come from the cultural elite. Now he's in the cultural elite, and he addresses current events from his own perspective. So I love these newsletters I get. But the most amazing one is called Famous People. And when I first said that to you, you sort of wondered, what the hell is that? And here's how it's two single women in New York. And this is how they describe it. We go to small parties, weird dinners, and aimless evenings in New York City, starring nobody famous. So it's a joke. They're not famous, although maybe they'll start being famous. And they're young, 30-something, imports to New York City. 1 million of them come to New York every decade. And they roam the city, they interact with people, they make observations, they see things, and they drink alcohol. And sometimes I always forget that people drink alcohol, because even the most radical magazines like Mother Jones have cover stories about how alcohol is bad for you and everybody should be like Utah. In the old days, when alcohol was banned, because you can get alcohol in Utah now. And for some reason, Zach, I think a final stage of dementia is while you're sitting there watching television and you think the television is talking to you, you know what I mean? Zach, when I go over the final edge in dementia, you'll make sure to go time out, Stanton. Maybe we should stop doing these shows, you know?
Because I don't know if we'd know the difference. No, I'm kidding.
So I read them, I love them. And they did a 3-part series on a movie called Sideways, a 2004 film about two very unattractive men, one who cheated with his girlfriend, and one who can't deal with his responsibilities because of his drinking. And that film became famous and popular before the women were, cognitively alert. They weren't adults.
To be fair, one of them was a more unattractive man. So
what is really unattractive about the way,
anyway.
So there's a 3-part series. In the first part of the series, they have to go to the Atlantic and say, we want to spend a weekend retracing the steps of the movie Sideways. We pay the expenses. And this is where I'm thinking I'm watching television. I was deeply struck by that movie in 2004. I found it extremely unattractive, especially how the character Giametti drank.
Mm-hmm.
It's a disgusting scene as he goes through a wine tasting where you spit out the wine and he starts gulping the whole spittoon of wine. And so in the first in the series, they go, why did we want to do a 3-part series on Sideways? And this is their quote. Sideways is classic early-aughts indie in that it is talky, morose, and about objectively bad people getting really drunk. And they wanted to do a 3-part series about that. That's what, if I was a famous person, that's what I'd want to do a 3-part series about. The stakes are never very high other than existentially. Today, we are introducing a 3-part Famous People special on modern sideways adventure, otherwise known as Lizzie and Kaitlyn take Buellton, California, or a journey into boys strip and wine country culture. Phew. I'm watching this and I'm saying, are they tailoring this just to me? So they want to set the sideways narrative on its heels. And the second in the series is titled this, Going Sideways Part 2, visiting the vineyards that they go to in Sideways, but without the drunk driving part. So they never use the word harm reduction. But among the many bad things those two guys do, Giametti and his friend, is they drive drunk. And, you can get a tour with somebody who drives who isn't drinking. And so they begin by doing the classic harm reduction things, being well rested, eating well, having a driver, and then they have hosts and hostess who, give them the wines and they pace them. And when I'm watching this, reading this, in Medium, they have a nonstop litany of people whose lives alcohol has ruined. Famous people, Brad Pitt and whoever, and how they've had to learn, they thought it might have been okay, but it's not okay. And how you get over drinking. But most people drink. And the people who drink in general are better integrated and healthier than people who don't drink. Medium has nobody like that.
You keep referencing Medium, and you're talking about Medium, the online blog.
Oh, right.
Right. And that's so people, you get things filtered to you that happen to be about addiction and alcohol. That's an interest of yours. But all of the things that you get curated for you, I guess, by some algorithm is people whose lives are ruined, who couldn't handle alcohol, who they're devastated by it. And you're saying, two people who are saying that the joys of the movie Sideways, the thing probably why it became so popular, thing people fell in love with, without the unattractive messiness of people who couldn't handle their own lives. Interesting.
And there are tons of people like that.
Right.
How has Medium decided to ignore that majority of the population? How do they, let's just show unpleasant experiences with alcohol. It even extends I believe that they're just mid-American, for want of a better term, WAS. So they go to, this is in the wine country in California. It's very Italian. And even they were shocked a little bit. The head of one of the wineries studied winemaking in UC Davis and is clearly a genius. My favorite of his was the Grenache with notes of forest. I don't even know what that means. His name is Andrew Murray, and he was introduced to wine at age 12, and the famous people raised their eyebrows. They said, are you allowed to give people wine at age 12? And then they end up by saying, but it seems to have all worked out for Andrew. And then I wonder if Americans realize the state of California has a state University of California at Davis. It has a department of viticulture and enology, a university funded by the government focuses on making delicious alcoholic beverages. Really? And so even they, as open-minded as they are, people in California, Italy, France really love wine without getting drunk on it. Frank, one of their guides said, God, I love smelling wine. It makes me feel a little high. So they're going around, and their shtick is they do normal things, and then they take notes and write about it. So their experience is rich in conversation and caring companionship. But Kaitlyn accuses Lizzie of being a wet blanket because at one point, Lizzie stops drinking the samples of wine and just giving them to Frank. So they have a little shtick between the two women, you know what I mean? And she's taking notes and she writes in caps, Liz can't hang, meaning she's not taking all the drinks she's being given. But then Liz demurs, quote, I think I can make the case that refusing this final tasting flight actually allowed me to hang even more. In other words, she's giving a life process program answer. She's saying, well, if I become fuzzy-headed, I'm not going to be as alert to either the taste of the wine or the people I'm talking with. I'm just not going to do it. And so they've gone beyond, and they're going beyond harm reduction. And Liz is talking about purposeful living and substance use. And it's a model for constructive substance use that emerges organically from the sensibilities of two young contemporary women. They're having a discussion. Why aren't you drinking your wine? And she's saying, well, it makes me less alert. The taste of the wine, I can't really distinguish it, and, it's just going to be less fun and less interesting. That's not harm reduction. That's life enhancement. I have to take into account, my impression of them is that they're two middle Americans. And so in the middle of the night, I might wake up in a nightmare. They might become sober, those two women. And, they might write a column. We realize that alcohol is bad for you.
Oh, yeah, I know. There's
having fun in New York.
There does seem to be a remembered self that's a lot different than the self that's living in the moment and maybe more sensible, with a lot of the people who write about their past escapades with drugs and alcohol. Yeah, that'd be a nightmare.
Their old self, they're actually, you sort of read it and it's interesting, and now they've cut off that entire part of their life.
Right. Like I've heard, I even have just friends or people I know who talk about who I knew when they were drinking, and probably there was like something getting in the way of their lives. So they probably weren't doing it in a great, but I also remember them doing it and having basically life enhancement, like you mentioned, had to work a few things out. But then they'll talk about their drinking and say, drinking ruined me. I was, begging for money. I was, all these things that maybe weren't so true. It's just part of your remembered self because for some reason sobriety is good. So you're saying that would be a nightmare if these women decided, let's go sober and look back on our drinking.
I hope, I'd be able to withstand it, but I have some faith that won't happen. And you play a role in what's next. As you know, I'm 76, and I have a couple of friends who are even older than me, Archie and my friend Larry and Idaho, and I give them and you a couple of cases of beer over the holidays. So I think that's proof, not in your case, because you're about the women's age, I guess, that there are people that live long, fruitful, healthy lives, welcoming alcohol as an interesting byproduct, something that they share in companionship, they enjoy, and that is actually helpful. So I just wanted to throw that in. I'm going to make a confession. I can't deal with sober people. It's just not possible for me. You know what I mean? It's sort of like if somebody tells me, oh, I hate Jews, or not that all sober people hate Jews, please.
Just most.
Or they say, they say I'm a Trump supporter. I just get up and I say, you and I are just not going to be, in a good place. You know what I mean?
How do you feel about vegans? Like similar, there are some reasons why like eating that way would be good for your lifestyle. There are probably some reasons why not drinking. There are probably some realistically decent reasons why people don't drink. Maybe they just don't like drinking.
For Filter, that was one of the top 10 columns.
Yeah.
And the column was sort of, well, nobody's totally sober. Do you know what I mean?
Right. So people who say I'm sober,
well, they're taking it
to mean something specific. Yeah.
And some of them are smoking marijuana. I'm not saying anybody you know is smoking marijuana. But then you go, okay, you're not drinking alcohol and you're smoking marijuana. And that's sober. Who makes the list of what's sober?
I see what you're saying. So you don't like sober people, like this banner sober that people fly over their personalities. I understand. Yeah.
And so I just want to come out at the end. This piece of the Atlantic is a seminal beyond harm reduction source, because it understands the positive substance use can never come about from bad wrapping substances, which Medium does nonstop. It results from promoting community, social meanings, life purpose, and human contact. And that's so obvious. It's so simple-minded. It's so clear that that's what we have to do. And yet, for some reason, out of the Midwest, I believe they're from the Midwest, I don't really know, two young women arose as
Accidentally.
as opposed to temperance,
Right.
where, Carrie Nation got up and said nobody should ever drink. And they said alcohol is a part of life that we enjoy. We drink. Maybe we even drink too much sometimes, and then we cut back. It's an important part of our lives and the lives of the people we know. And this is the life we choose to live. And so, Beyond Harm Reduction by Atlantic, as written by famous people.
Excellent. I like that. I like that a lot. Thank you again, Stanton. I don't know when this will go up. Probably past Christmas, but maybe I'll say Happy New Year to you.